We need to talk about the addiction crisis. In 1996, Purdue Pharma was licensed to start selling Oxycontin in Canada.
Some patients may be afraid of taking opioids because they're perceived as too strong or addictive, but that is far from actual fact. Less than 1% of patients taking opioids actually become addicted.
They were mismarketing it, and they continue to do so anyway because it really was all about profit.
The outcry over drug companies pushing painkillers has become too loud to ignore.
Physicians were then encouraged to assess pain as the fifth vital sign and freely prescribe opiates for treatment.
Doctors are handing this out, and we were told to do so because we wanted to treat pain.
Opiates then flooded the streets. They often ended up in the hands of individuals who the drugs were not prescribed for. This phenomenon is known as diversion. In 2001, media reports started to emerge of addiction and overdoses from Oxycontin. By 2012, nearly every province and territory had taken measures to curb the harm. But it was too late, and the damage was done. The door was now open to the spread of illicit drugs like fentanyl. More and more Canadians fell victim to the addiction crisis. In 2016, Canada's first so-called safe supply program started in London, Ontario.
We're investing to extend safer supply.
We now have what is referred to as Safe Supply Program in my area.
This taxpayer-funded drug experiment intended to curb the use of more dangerous drugs like fentanyl. But the irony here is that these drugs were anything but safe. Not only did they not solve the addiction crisis, they made it worse.
Initially, I was supportive of Safe Supply.
A doctor at a nearby hospital initially thought that Safe Supply might help their patients, but the opposite happened. The frequency and severity of her patients' infections rose dramatically. Not only that, but the Safe Supply hydromorphone was quickly diverted.
Health Canada seems to have almost no strategy in place to deal with opioid diversion. Diversion is a technical term for selling on the black market here.
We have no idea how much they're diverting.
Individuals would collect their hydromorphone tablets from the pharmacy and then go and sell them on the street to purchase stronger drugs like fentanyl.
I have also had patients who are in the Safe Supply Program that divert their Dilaudid to buy fentanyl.
These drugs were often sold to teenagers who perceived them as safe because they were marketed that way. Once they developed an addiction, they often moved on to harder drugs like fentanyl. And this is the cruelest part about opioid addiction.
My dealer said, you know, I've got these new pills, they're fake oxys. He didn't tell me they were fentanyl because nobody knew what fentanyl was yet. He just said they're 100 times stronger and they're only $5 more. And I was just like, okay, because I was getting a pretty high tolerance at this point.
The body quickly develops a tolerance to the drug, so you need to take more and more to achieve the same effect. This often leads people to more potent drugs. Safe Supply is fueling fentanyl use. And once an individual gets into the cycle of addiction, their lives quickly spiral out of control. I saw this firsthand when I visited London last year. This failed experiment is not just happening in London, Ontario, but in every community across the country where so-called safe supply has been tried, it has failed. Crime and chaos and addiction follow. Communities in British Columbia are amongst the worst impacted. Since 2020, these safe supply programs have been flooding our streets with opiates. Last spring, a story broke about a 14-year-old girl, Camilla Sword, who died after becoming addicted to hydromorphone. The story exposes that drug dealers would purchase hydromorphone from the streets in East Hastings in downtown Vancouver and resell these drugs at a profit to teenagers living in Port Coquitlam and other little communities throughout the Lower Mainland.
Organized crime individuals literally stood outside of pharmacies and bought or collected the safe supply from those that were receiving it. Is this true?
Yes.
Camilla's friends tell Sword they buy drugs marketed as safe supply.
Camilla's friends said these drugs were consumed in large groups with kids as young as 11. Global News went into downtown Vancouver to test whether hydromorphone was that easily accessible.
We overheard drug dealers shouting dillies, a slang word for Dilaudid or hydromorphone, which is one of the drugs the government has encouraged doctors to prescribe as safe supply to those suffering from addiction.
Within a half hour, the journalist had acquired nearly 30 tablets of hydromorphone.
We're told this is hydromorphone, also known as dillies, also known as Dilaudid. A lab later confirmed the pills were in fact hydromorphone. Some were still in the package, which doctors say looks like government safe supply pills.
In Prince George, an RCMP drug bust found 10,000 pills, including hydromorphone. Courageous addiction doctors from across the country have been calling for an end of Canada's so-called safe supply experiment. They say there is accumulating evidence that safe supply programs are being widely abused. They criticize the government for failing to, and I quote, recognize the negative public health impact of safe supply programs that we are seeing in our practices and communities.
Unfortunately, these people aren't being listened to because safer supply advocates tend to bully addiction physicians into silence. If you criticize safer supply, your professional career could go down the toilet, your reputation could go down the toilet.
These brave, common sense doctors say that safe supply has put Canadians at grave risk for harm, including addiction, injection-related infections, transitioning to fentanyl, and overdose death. Law enforcement is also speaking out. Fiona Wilson, who is president of the British Columbia Association of Chiefs of Police and Deputy Chief of the Vancouver Police Department, said,
"We also know that about 50% of the pills that we come across that are hydromorphone can indeed be attributed to safe supply."
The Liberal government cannot say they weren't warned about the negative impacts of safe supply. In early 2022, the Stanford Lancet Commission on the North American Opioid Crisis, the largest study of its kind ever conducted, sounded the alarm that safe supply would make the drug crisis worse. It is getting worse. It's getting worse every day. Every day, more and more lives are lost to addiction. From January 2016 to September 2023, 42,494 Canadians died from opioids. This needs to stop. These are our friends, our mothers, our fathers, our siblings, our colleagues, our neighbors, our children. Their lives matter, and their lives are worth saving. Common sense conservatives have a plan to bring our loved ones home drug-free. First, we will end the Liberal-funded Safe Supply program, which is effectively government-funded drug trafficking. Next, we will bring hope to those battling addiction with a common sense plan for treatment and recovery that includes evidence-based medication that saves the lives of people with addiction by preventing overdose and help treat severe withdrawal symptoms at the beginning of recovery. And finally, we will launch a $44 billion lawsuit to make Big Pharma pay for causing the addiction crisis. Money recovered from this lawsuit will be used to fund recovery programs to bring our loved ones home drug-free. Conservatives know that recovery is possible, and we believe every Canadian with addiction deserves the opportunity to pursue recovery. I'm Layla Goodridge, Member of Parliament for Fort McMurray Cold Lake and the Conservative Shadow Minister for Addiction. Please share this video.